Welcome to Announcing the Game, where professional public address announcers share their expertise and best practices to help to make you a better public address announcer. I'm Tom Winnicky. I've announced at the high school level at Fayetteville Miscellaneous High School in New York State. I've announced football, soccer, field hockey, basketball, ice hockey, wrestling, track and field, baseball, and lacrosse. I've announced Section 3 championships here in New York State for football, field hockey, boys and girls basketball, and boys and girls lacrosse. And I also announced the New York State championships for football and girls lacrosse. I also announced collegiately at the Division I level at Colgate University of the Patriot League and at Syracuse University of the Atlantic Coast Conference. At this level, I've announced football, soccer, field hockey, basketball, ice hockey, lacrosse, and softball. I've had the opportunity to announce conference championships and early round NCAA tournament and NIT action. I've also announced international competition in basketball and ice hockey. Now, in this episode of Announcing the Game, today we'll talk about basketball, both high school boys and girls, and in college, men's and women's game. We'll talk about how much of these games at these levels are similar, and we'll also touch on some differences between these levels. We'll cover your responsibility at these games, both before, during, and after the game. We'll go over what to be aware of in lieu of these differences as they relate to timing, team fouls, technical fouls, and flagrant fouls. So, congratulations! You've been hired as the PA announcer for your school's basketball programs. You're going to have a lot of fun announcing these games. So now let's take some steps to ensure that you enjoy calling these games and you don't get caught off guard by anything. We'll cover things like name pronunciations, along with pre-game, in-game, and post-game announcements. We'll go over who to contact for all this information. All right, folks, let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about pre-game. I hope you've seen some of our other videos and heard me say things like luck favors the prepared, or Branch Rickey from the old Brooklyn Dodgers with his quote that luck is the residue of design, or my dad's favorite, I'd rather be lucky than good. All of these quotes speak to your preparation. Preparation in terms of what you do before you ever set foot on the game site. So let's start with the rosters. Are the team rosters available to you online? Well, right now a lot of high schools will do this, and pretty much all college teams do. So if they are available online, did you download them and print them off? If your high school or your opponents don't do this, do you call them well enough in advance so they can email them to you? For college rosters, I'll copy and paste them into a spreadsheet. I'll resort all the columns so I just read everything left to right, starting with position, height, hometown, number, and then name. That lets me read the starting lineups right across the page, so I don't have to jump from column to column across the page the way they may be sorted online. It's just an easy way to see the rosters and read them quickly. A roster from the internet and format it to the way that I like to use it on game day. Here's a screenshot of an example of a college team's basketball roster on their website. You can see how it has everybody's picture on it, some hyperlinks to find more information about each player. This ear icon is an audio file. If I click on it, I get the pronunciation of the player's name, their grade in school, their position, their height, their weight, their hometown, and their major. So if I copy this and then paste it into a spreadsheet, I get this. I've deleted the pictures of the players. There's the number. Here's the links for ear icons for the links to the audio file, hyperlinks for all the players, and everything else listed here. It took its height and interpreted it as a date. So June is the 6th month. So this player is 6 feet tall. This player is 6 feet tall. This player is 6'3", and so on. Now I don't need their major for the starting lineups. I don't need their weight, so I can delete all of that. If I select the entire spreadsheet, I can delete the hyperlink, so I don't have to worry about clicking on something and another file opening up. Then what I want to do is resort these columns so it reads logically as I read the starting lineup. So once I do that, I get something that looks like this. I've sorted it so their position is first, their height is second, their year in school, their hometown, their number, and their name. So if I'm introduced starting lineups, I just read directly from left to right. Starting at guard, a 6-foot junior from Midland, Pennsylvania, number 0, Nellie Cummings. And then I'd go right down for the other 4 starters. If I kept it in this order, I'd have to jump around. Starting at guard, a 6-foot junior from Midland, Pennsylvania, number 0, Nellie Cummings. And with the lights off during starting lineups and everybody's all excited, it eliminates the possibility of me skipping around and reading the wrong space of the wrong player. This way, I just read directly across the roster. You see, I like to get all these done all at once before the season starts. I like to do it this way so I don't have to worry about a game in the middle of the season that I may have forgotten about a roster for. One tip for you, if you have to call a high school for a roster, talk to the secretary in the athletic office. They'll be more than happy to help you, and you don't have to worry about playing phone tag with an athletic director. They're often out of the office, and they can be hard to track down. Here's another plus with talking to a secretary. They can help you with pronunciations on rosters. Now that makes one less thing that you have to worry about during your pregame work when you get to the game site. Now what about preparing a stat sheet for each game? And we'll talk more about that when we get to in-game announcements, and we'll show you an example. How about highlighters? You can use them to highlight starters for both teams, making it easier to read. Now, many teams now turn the lights off during their home team starting lineup. Do you have a small clip-on reading light like this that you can use so you can still see the roster when the lights are off? Are you, and this is probably specific to high school, are you also in charge of the music? Do you have all the wires and electronics and everything that you need? Or does your school provide all that equipment? You may just keep it simple and play music off your phone. I've seen others out there with a lot more elaborate setups, and that's fine. My point is, if music is your responsibility also, make sure that you're ready to go, and make sure that that music has been screened by the school's administrators beforehand. So, you've arrived at the game site. So what's first on the PA announcer's to-do list? For me, once I find my place at the table and get my notebook open with the names roster showing, my first job is to get the pronunciations down. Now this works a little differently for high school and for college. For high school games, I always get to the game site before halftime of the JV game. That gives me enough time to find my seat, get set up, and then find a coach from the visiting team. You see, most high school varsity teams will go to their locker rooms at the end of the third quarter of the JV game. I want to get to these coaches before they get into their full pregame mode for their games. I want to do what I need to do with them without interrupting their pregame routine. I need to respect what they need to do and get my information from them early enough and then just get out of their way. I always start by introducing myself and welcoming them to our school. Then I ask to read through the roster with them. After that, I'll go through the pregame routine with them. Things like the order of starting lineups and the national anthem and any other pregame announcements that they may hear me make. Now, with college games, it's a bit different. I'm there 75 to 90 minutes before game time. Once I find my seat at the table and get set up, I first look through the game notes that are provided to look for a pronunciation guide for the visiting team. Now those are good tools to have, but I've learned the hard way not to completely rely on them. You see, ideally, when names are spelled phonetically in these guides, the syllable that gets the emphasis should be capitalized. So when you see it, you know what syllable to emphasize. Sometimes in these guides, the names are all printed in lowercase, which doesn't help at all. If we were to use my name as an example, if it shows up with the first syllable in capital letters, W-I-N, then A-K-E-Y, Winnicky, you know how to say it, emphasizing that first syllable. If it's just shown in all lowercase letters, well, how do you say it? Winnicky, Winnucky, Winnicky? It doesn't tell you. So no matter how it's displayed, I always find the SID, the Sports Information Director for that visiting team, to read through those rosters and hometowns to make sure that I have it correct. Now, I've said that I found the SID, not the head coach. At the college level, it's not appropriate to approach the head coach. They have too much on their mind during their pregame routine. That team's sports information director, the SID, is always your first go-to at a college game. Also, at the college level, teams may have a different order to introduce their starters instead of numerically. That's just something to ask about for both your team and your guests for that day. Now, at any basketball games, there are two teams on the court, but you are also part of a team here at the table. You are working with everyone else as well as the game officials. You're also working with game administration, coordinating any pregame, in-game, or post-game reads, as well as knowing what to do in case of an emergency. Try to get your seat right next to the home scorebook. One of your duties is to announce personal and team fouls. Being right next to the scorebook makes it easy to always check with them to be sure you're always saying the correct number for personal fouls and for team fouls. Now, I said the home team's scorebook. That's the official scorebook for the game. The visiting team's scorebook at the table is not official, so be sure that you sit next to that official book, the home team's scorebook. You see, if there's a discrepancy between the home and the visiting team's books, whatever's in the home book is official, so be sure to sit next to that person. Being next to the book also makes it easier to work with the game officials. They report fouls facing the home team's scorebook, so it's easy for you to hear them and to see them. Now, one extra thing that I cover with game officials during pregame, and this is only related to college games, is to ask them that if a play goes to a video review, they need an instant replay for something, please ask them to tell you what they're looking for and what they saw on the replay, so you can announce that information to the crowd. Now, some arenas are set up with a microphone at the table so that the officials will use it to announce to the crowd the result of that video review, but some arenas aren't. Now, I've worked in both situations, so if there's no microphone, I want to have a way to get this information from them and relay it to the crowd. Now, remember, our primary goal is that of a reporter. We are tour guides. We are there to inform the crowd of what's going on in the game. Now, there's nothing more frustrating as a fan when you see something going on the court and don't know what's going on. So take advantage of communicating with the officials about these situations so you can accurately inform the fans. So when I've asked them, they'll often tell me that they always think to tell television what's going on, but they may forget to tell me as the public address announcer. So checking in with them is always a smart idea. Marketing, especially at the college level, has all the reads scripted and timed out for us. Now, it's our job to ask for copies of that timing sheet and those reads ahead of time, so you know when they expect you to read something. It also gives you the chance to rehearse those reads ahead of time. Are there certain words in some copy that you may want to emphasize over other words? Even ask marketing, how do they want it read? The last thing you want to sound like is a robot reading something with no inflection at all. You would read something about a halftime shooting contest and our contestant has a chance to go home with a prize. You'd read that much differently than one about emergency exits, and please paying attention to stadium personnel. At a high school game, you may be given a script to open the game, or maybe you won't. If you are, someone's done your work for you, and that's great. But if you haven't, you should come up with something else yourself. I like to start with a welcome statement to make it sound like we're all glad that fans from both teams are here. Maybe something like this. To all of our guests from Orchard Park High School and to our home fans here supporting Fayetteville Manlius, welcome back to the House 1 gym here at Fayetteville Manlius High School for today's game between the Orchard Park Quakers and our Fayetteville Manlius Hornets. Now, you just heard me say our Fayetteville Manlius Hornets instead of your Fayetteville Manlius Hornets. I've heard Alan Roach, who's the public address announcer for the Minnesota Vikings, as well as for the Super Bowl and many other major sporting events, when he introduces the Minnesota Vikings, he says, "For our Minnesota Vikings." Now, I thought that sounded a lot better than "your Minnesota Vikings" or Fayetteville Manlius Hornets or whoever your team is. So if Mr. Roach ever does see this video, thank you, sir, for your impact on my and other public address announcers' careers. And I hope you don't mind that I kind of took your idea here. It may not sound like a big difference, but to me it does, so I use it. Many places where I've announced, and maybe you've seen this too, will read a sportsmanship message right after the welcome to the arena. If it's a college game, one will be provided for you, and many high schools will also have a specific read for you to do. If not, well, you should be prepared and have one ready. Then, since the fans are paying attention to the welcome, and then the sportsmanship read is starting to settle down, and now this is a good time to introduce the national anthem. Now, there's one thing here that I want to make a point of regarding the national anthem. All arenas and gyms will have handicapped seating areas. Now, earlier I talked about in the welcome to make it sound as if we're glad that everyone is here, and that includes people in these sections. So if, whenever possible, I'd like to add to the anthem introduction by saying, at this time we ask that if you are able to please rise and please remove your hats as you face our flag with your right hand over your heart to honor America with the playing of our national anthem. Now the part where I say, if you are able, recognizes those people as important members of the fans at this game. I've actually had parents and spouses of handicapped individuals come up to me and thank me for saying it this way. Now this just reinforces with me how important it is to introduce the national anthem this way. Now you can check out our video in this series on the national anthem for more ideas related to this. Starting lineups then come last. It wouldn't make sense to get everyone all excited with the starting lineups and quiet them all down for the national anthem. So it's best to save the lineups for last. As for reading the starting lineups, personally, I like to refer to the visiting team as our guests. I'll introduce them something like this. And now let's get right to today's starting lineups. First, for our guests from New York City, the Fordham Rams. Then I would start reading through the roster. Now remember how I had it sorted so I could read directly from left to right, so it sounded pretty good. Here's what it may sound like. Starting at guard, a 6'3" sophomore from Brooklyn, New York, number 14, Ken Charles. Now after announcing all 5 starters, I finish by announcing the head coach and then all their assistant coaches. Then I move on to the home teams, and for games at Colgate, they turn off the lights whenever they introduce the starting lineup. So that's when I use my handy little clip-on light. Then I go on to say, and now let's meet the starting lineup for our Colgate Raiders. Remember my Alan Roach reference earlier? This is where I use it. For high school games, I also introduce the officials after the starting lineups for both teams. I also list their association with their names and introduce them as Mr. So-and-so or Ms. or Mrs. So-and-so. It's just a way to be classy and professional with them. Now, some college conferences like to have their officials introduced, and some don't want that done. We need to find out what's expected at the schools and conferences that we announce for. Now, after the starting lineups are finished, then everyone gets all pumped up to start the game. Now, if you're one of those people who also do music, here's where you add that music to get them all pumped up. And then the officials have the game, and the game is ready to go. So now, let's talk about some of those differences between high school boys and girls and the college game for men's and women. The length of the periods may vary depending on the level, whether it's a girls' or a women's game or a boys' or a men's game, but that in itself isn't really important to us as the public address announcer. The main differences are, however, how team fouls are counted and when the bonus comes into play in each period. So let's start with high school. The National Federation of High Schools for girls and boys, along with NCAA women, all play 4 quarters. NCAA men play 2 halves. Now, in any game of basketball, you're still going to announce who scored the basket, who committed a foul, how many personals and team fouls it is to that point, and who enters the game for who. Now, this is all the same whether it's a girls' or women's game or a boys' or a men's game. Also, for everyone, boys and girls in high school and men's and women's in college, the player is disqualified after committing their 5th personal foul. So the real difference is that we need to know is when the bonus free throws with non-shooting fouls come into play. For high school boys, the rule is changed for the 2023-24 season. The boys no longer shoot a 1-and-1 on and after that 7th team foul in each half. Everything now is a double bonus. 2 free throws are now shot on and after the 5th team foul in each quarter. Now this is the same as the high school girls game. Now, all high school games now shoot 2 free throws on the 5th team foul in each quarter. Now, what that means for us is, for boys and girls high school games, we're keeping track of team fouls for each quarter. So now, during a high school boys and girls game, for example, if you announce a personal foul at the end of the first quarter, say for number 5, Jane Smith, as her first personal and first team foul, then that same player commits the first personal foul in the next quarter, you need to now say Bobcats foul on number 5, Jane Smith, her second personal and first team foul. Now you see what happened? It's a new quarter, so her personal fouls keep adding up, but the team foul count starts over. Technical fouls at the high school level for both boys and girls are 2 shots plus possession. A technical foul assessed to that player also counts as a personal foul and a team foul. So going back to my point about counting team fouls for high school boys and girls, keep technical fouls in mind when counting team fouls. Your count after each quarter restarts for both boys and girls. Your announcement in this situation would sound something like this. Technical foul assessed to the Cougars, number 12, Joe Brown. That's his 4th personal and 5th team foul. Shooting the 2-shot technical for the Hornets is number 40, Paul Losman. After the 2 technical foul shots, you go on to say, due to that technical foul, the Hornets are also awarded possession. Now, you may have seen a college game where a flagrant foul is called, and we'll get to those at that level in a minute. But I did want to say that there is a flagrant foul at the high school level. That's defined as a foul so severe that it puts an opponent in serious injury, and for violations that are persistently vulgar or abusive. The penalty for this is 2 free throws plus possession, and the offending player is disqualified. Your announcement would reflect all of this information. Flagrant foul called on the Zephyrs number 20, Ben Jones. The Coyotes will be awarded 2 free throws and possession. Jones has been disqualified from tonight's game. You can see how this announcement covers all of the rules concerning the flagrant foul at the high school level. Now, admittedly, these are very rare, and hopefully you never see one in your whole announcing career, but you should know about this just in case. Now, here's probably a good time for a disclaimer. Yes, I feel that we, as top-notch public address announcers, should know rules like this. But if and when they are called in a game that you're announcing, always check with the officials when they report the call to the table. Now, as part of their reporting that foul, they may go on to say what happens next. If they don't, confirm it with them. How many shots? Who gets possession? Is anyone disqualified? Understand all of that before you make any announcement. Now let's take a look at the college game and differences between the men's and women's games. Rule books for both NCAA men and women are available as a free digital download. A simple Google search for NCAA Men's Basketball Rulebook or NCAA Women's Basketball Rulebook will get to a page with options, one of which is a free digital download. Now, unlike the high school game, men count team fouls for each half, while women count them for each quarter, similar to the high school game. A player is still disqualified after their 5th personal, for both the men's and women's collegiate games. Now remember, since collegiate women play 4 quarters instead of 2 halves like the men, their bonus free throws come into play differently than in a men's game. The men shoot 1-and-1 free throws on the 7th team foul and shoot the double bonus, 2 shots, on the 10th team foul. If you think back, this is now different from the high school boys with that new current rule change. The college women game don't shoot 1-and-1s. They shoot 2 shots on and after the 5th personal foul in each quarter. This is the same now for both high school boys and girls. Now, another difference we need to be aware of are flagrant fouls. There are 2 levels of these. They're just called different things in the men's and the women's game. For the men, a flagrant 1 foul is defined as excessive contact, including an intentional foul. The result of this is 2 free throws plus possession, and 3 flagrant 1 fouls by the same player in the same game leads to an ejection. A flagrant 2 foul in the men's game is unsportsmanlike conduct that's extreme in nature, including fighting. Now the result of this play are 2 free throws plus possession, and the offending player is ejected from the game. In the women's game, what the men called a flagrant 1 foul is called an intentional or an unsportsmanlike foul. It's also 2 free throws plus possession. Again, this is for a play ruled to have excessive contact. A disqualifying foul is the same as the men's flagrant 2 foul. Again, for unsportsmanlike conduct that's extreme in nature, including fighting. Now it's 2 free throws plus possession, and the offending player is ejected from the game. Now in the men's college game, a Class B technical foul like hanging on the rim or something to delay the game is 1 shot. These do not count toward personal or team fouls. A Class A technical foul is 2 shots. Now this would be for unsportsmanlike conduct. These fouls also count towards personal and team fouls. Now another thing to remember is a player is ejected after either 2 Class A technical fouls or 1 Class A and 2 Class B technical fouls in the same game. Now in the women's collegiate game, there are indirect technicals and direct technicals. An indirect technical is one given to the coach for their bench's or their team's behavior, while a direct technical foul is given to the coach for their behavior. Both carry 2 free throws, and the direct technical foul counts toward team fouls for the bonus in that quarter. The indirect technicals do not. Again, something to remember when counting fouls towards the bonus. Now, all of this may sound like a lot, and quite frankly, it is. But as top-notch public address announcers, we should at least have a working knowledge of rules like this. But remember that disclaimer from a few minutes ago. Always check with the officials if and when any of these fouls are assessed in a game that you're announcing. It's best to be a second or 2 late and be accurate instead of being inaccurate and fast. The last thing you want to do is to have to correct yourself because you thought you knew the rule, but you misspoke on one of the details. Official signals are something that we need to have a working knowledge of, and you can see them on our website, publicaddressannouncer.org. One thing that we can keep our eyes on is the first signal that the official makes when blowing a whistle. If you see the official raise an open hand, they're calling a violation, so be ready to announce something like traveling, over and back, a double dribble, some kinds of inbound violation, or maybe a timeout. If you see the official raise a closed fist, you know it's for a foul. Now, when reporting this foul to the scores table, the official signals things like a hit or a push or a hold, a block or a charge or an illegal screen or something. We as announcers don't need to announce what the foul specifically was. We just need to stick with who committed the foul, how many personals and team fouls it is at the time, and what the result of that call is. You see, we have to have our announcements done before play begins again. If, let's say, the result of the foul are free throws, we need to say who fouled, how many personals and team fouls they have, who's shooting, how many shots they have, all before the referee on the baseline gives the ball to the shooter. As you can see, we need to move pretty quickly here. So as soon as you see the official report the foul to the table, you need to begin announcing this information. It could sound something like this. Bison foul to number 4, Ed Kupiak, his first and the team's third. Brody Miggs on the line for the Raiders with 2 shots. Now, as you're doing this, keep an eye on the baseline official. If you see them give the ball to the shooter, you need to be finished. If you get everything out except who's shooting and the shooter has the ball, it's best to stop talking. If you can't get the shooter's name out fast enough, if it's a 2-shot foul, there's nothing wrong with, before the second shot, to say, Miggs with 1 more shot. If it's a 1-and-1 and they miss the front end, or if it's a 1-shot foul, just move on without saying who the shooter is. Make a mental note to be faster next time to get everything in, or shorten what you have to say. Maybe shorten it to be something like this. Bison foul, number 4, Kupiak, his first, the team's 4th. Miggs with 2 shots. You keep everyone informed, and you stay out of the way of the officials and out of the way of the game. Now, you ask any official, and the last thing they want is to make the game more difficult to officiate. If they're waiting for you to finish announcing information on a foul, that's more time for the players or the coaches to complain to each other or to the officials. You want to keep the flow of the game moving, so be accurate and quick with your announcements. Now, even worse is talking as the free throw shooter has the ball and is getting ready to shoot. The shooter or their coach will be upset with us, and they should be. So see the call, announce it quickly and completely, and then get out of the way of the game. Now, as a side note, there's never a need for us to say how many free throws a shooter made. Everyone can see that for themselves. You also don't need to announce the score after each basket. You're not only talking over the action, but that's what scoreboards are for. Substitutions, well, they happen all the time in a basketball game. Players are supposed to report to the table by the scorebook when they're coming in. On the next dead ball, the official beckons them into the game. Now, there's a lot of ways to keep track of this, but I'll show you what I've come up with that makes things pretty easy for me. Now, here is an example of that in-game stat sheet I referred to a minute ago. I opened up a spreadsheet and created columns for names, personal fouls, and team fouls. You see, I pasted in the names of the home team on top, the visiting team down below. Then for personal fouls, I have a column, and you see some of the personals are circled, some are not. This is a collegiate men's game, so they keep track of team fouls in the first half and the second half. If this was a collegiate women's game or a high school game, you would have a box here for the third quarter and the fourth quarter. Since this example is a collegiate men's game, this is first half and second half. So all these personals that were committed in the first half, at the end of the first half, I circle them all. I know that I have to restart my count in the second half, so I don't want to confuse a foul in the second half with one committed in the first half. So I differentiate them that way. So 1 plus 2 plus 1 plus 2 equals 6 team fouls in the first half. If Nellie Cummings commits his second personal in the second half, I would announce it this way. Raider personal to number 0, Nellie Cummings. His third personal, because personal fouls carry over, the 7th team foul. There's 7 team fouls committed in the second half, different from the first half. If Jordan Burns now commits his first personal, I would announce it this way. Raider foul to number 1, Jordan Burns. I would put a 1 mark in here. His first personal, I would add 1 because now this is the 8th team foul. So I would say, Raider personal to number 1, Jordan Burns. His first, the team's 8th, because there's 1 added here for his 1 personal. And you see I do that for both teams. This column on the right is how I keep track of substitutions. If a player is checked in the game, I would have drawn a circle and colored it in. Let's use Keegan Records here as an example. If he were to come to the table and check in, I would draw an empty circle next to his name. Once the official beckons him in, I color in the circle. By this example here, Keegan Records is checked in. He's already in the game. I don't have to worry about him as a current substitute. Nellie Cummings is waiting to come in. There's an empty circle next to his name. For the visiting team, Jamero Wilson is also at the table. He's waiting to come in. This circle's not filled in yet. Jake Betlow, number 2. He's been in the game once. He's coming in now a second time. So there are 3 individuals waiting at the table. At the next dead ball, the official blows the whistle and beckons the subs in the game. When I see this, I announce the substitutions in. I say, checking in for the Raiders, number 0, Nellie Cummings. In for the Mountain Hawks, number 1, Jamero Wilson. Now you notice I didn't say Jake Betlow. Let's say for this example, he's coming in for a free throw shooter. Evan Taylor just made a basket and he was fouled. He has 1 free throw. Betlow can't come in for the free throw shooter. If the official calls him in, you'll see Betlow wave to the official like he's shooting a basketball one-handed. I've seen that, so I don't announce him in the game. If Taylor misses his free throw, action is live, Betlow can't come in because the action is live. He waits for the next dead ball to come in. If Taylor makes his free throw, it's a dead ball. The official blows the whistle, beckons Betlow in the game. I can now say, Betlow now on the floor for the Mountain Hawks, in for Taylor. And I would color these circles in so I know not to worry about them anymore. So this is just a way for you to keep track of personal fouls in the first half and the second half. And this is for NCAA men. If this was high school or NCAA women, you'd have a box for the third quarter and fourth quarter, and you would circle the fouls at the end of the second quarter, circle the fouls at the end of the third quarter, so you don't mix them up. So you keep track of personal fouls, team fouls, and substitutions. This makes it easy. Say there's a whole bunch of subs coming in, and each team has 3 players at the table. There's 6 players coming in. I just have 6 empty circles drawn here, so I don't have to look up and down and try to match numbers to players. I just look for my empty circles and read those numbers. It makes it easy for me, and if you think this will work for you, I hope it works well for you. Now, when announcing girls and women's games, you'll run into the issue of long hair or braids or ponytails covering the players' numbers on their backs. So get into the habit of watching for them as they come up to the table and see their numbers on the front of their jersey. If you miss that, well, there's nothing wrong with asking for their number while they're waiting to get into the game, while they're waiting at the table. One subtle thing I like to do when announcing fouls is not to do it the same way every time. I've come up with 2 ways to say the same thing regarding the fouls. Something like this. Raider personal to number 1, Molly Nager, her first, and the team's first. Or, foul charge to the Raiders, number 1, Nager, her first personal, and first team foul. See, the last thing that I want to be is so monotonous that people tune me out. It's just one subtle way for me to do that. Another is for announcing baskets. Now, instead of always saying, basket by Jones all the time, I want to mix it up. So I've come up with a few different ways to say the same thing. So for a basket, I could say something like this. Basket by Langen, or I'll say, that's Emily Langen, or I'll just say the scorer's name, Emily Langen. Now, if there's an obvious assist on a basket, say for a fast break or a layup or a dunk, or a no-look pass for an easy basket, it's okay, as far as I'm concerned, to add an assist to your call. It would sound something like, that's Langen from Nager. It's just not something you do on every basket. Save that something for a special play. Let's talk timeouts. At the high school level, it's pretty simple. The official acknowledges the timeout call and reports it to the table. It will either be a full timeout, 60 seconds, where the official will hold both arms out to the side, or a 30-second timeout. The official will touch both shoulders with both hands. And your announcement would be, timeout Quakers, that's a full timeout. Or, the Quakers call timeout, a 30-second timeout. At the college level, on top of team-called timeouts, there are timeouts for media, basically so television can show their commercials. In the men's game, those timeouts are built into the game and are called on the first dead ball under 16 minutes, 12, 8, and 4 minutes left in each half. The official will blow their whistle and point to the scores table. Your announcement is simple. Timeout on the floor for media, or we have a media timeout. Also, the first team called timeout in the second half, regardless of the time on the clock, automatically goes to a media timeout. But this called timeout still counts as a called timeout by that team, even though it went to media. In the women's game, media timeouts are called at the first dead ball at or below the 5-minute mark in each quarter. Let's move on to halftime. At the high school level, ask if there's anything planned for you for halftime. The band may play, cheerleaders may have a routine, a youth group may have a halftime scrimmage. You may be asked to introduce them. Whatever it is, be sure to find out ahead of time and get the scripts so you aren't surprised at the last minute. If, for example, you know it's a high school senior night, be proactive and ask for these scripts ahead of time. Believe me, that's a lot better than being given a handwritten list just minutes before the ceremony. You can also use this time at halftime to give a free plug to the parents running the concession stand or to a student group that might be fundraising at that game. If there's nothing planned for you at a high school game, one thing I like to do at halftime was to read the scores of other teams at that school during the winter season. Now here's your chance to give some free exposure to those wrestlers, hockey players, indoor track athletes, bowlers, volleyball players, gymnasts, or others. Who knows? Maybe somebody in the crowd will hear something and want to watch one of these other teams in action. And the kids on these teams they'll love the free publicity. At the college level, you don't have that type of freedom. Everything will be scripted out for you. Now you may have a few reads to do. A band might play, there could be an on-court promotion, or maybe just musical play in the background. Know your part in this and part of the production, and be prepared to talk when it's your turn. Remember, we are part of the production. We are not a part of the show. What do I mean about being part of the production but not part of the show? Well, the production is us quickly interpreting official signals into our announcements, keeping fans informed on personal fouls, team fouls, substitutions, and baskets. It involves us rehearsing any scripts so we can read them effectively when we're prompted. It means being part of a team to put together and produce a smooth-running sporting event. It does not mean becoming the focus of attention. That belongs squarely on the student athletes, the coaches, the cheerleaders, not on us. Anything we say should be done with that in mind. And yes, we should be a little more excited when the home team scores a basket, but it will never be and should never be over the top. Always treat our guests, and remember, I call the visiting team our guests, treat them with respectful enthusiasm. I'm not adding nicknames to players. I'm not coming up with color commentary about different baskets. That puts the attention on me and away from the game. The people are there to watch the game. They're not there to hear us. Now I have to admit, I used to be that PA guy who would say the long drawn out 3 for a 3-point basket. Two things happened that made me change the way I announced that play. First was a game where the home team had a player that was making a ton of 3-point shots. I did my 3 after every one of those baskets, and the game turned into a runaway. Even the subs were making 3-point shots, and I kept doing that long, drawn-out 3 after every basket. Now, I suppose one could argue that why was the home team that was so far ahead still shooting 3-point baskets? But I realized that I was still calling the 3, even though the game had already been decided. I had to look at myself and say, that really wasn't the best way to go. The crowd went crazy after each successful 3-point shot. They didn't need me to say 3 to get them going nuts. That happened automatically, and it happened by what happened on the court, not by what I was saying. The second instance was when I was coaching high school basketball, and we were on the road. The PA announcer happened to be sitting right next to me at the end of our bench. Now, we were getting beat pretty bad, and he was going over the top with all of his announcements. He used nicknames for their players. He announced any of our baskets like we were at a funeral, and he was adding color commentary, including that made three-point shot. After a while, I finally had enough. I said, can you tone this down? His response, "It's our home game, coach, and I'll say whatever I want to." Well, okay then. Those two events told me that I didn't want to be that guy with a mic making those announcements. So I've since evolved from announcing a three-point basket that way. Instead of the three, I do add a little more oomph when the home team hits a three-pointer, but I can still announce them in any situation for either team respectfully. I would simply say, "Three-point basket for Richardson." I'll emphasize the words three-point basket a little more for the home team without going over the top. Now, one thing you need to remember about a three-point basket. There may be a time when the shooter is really close to the three-point line when they make the shot. We as announcers need to rely on the official to tell us if it's a three or not. If they hold up both arms, we know it's a three-point basket and we announce it that way. If they see the shooter's foot on or in front of the line, they'll signal to us with two fingers. So then be sure to announce that it's a two-point shot. Another small announcement you need to remember, especially about girls and women's games. One is to announce 1 minute remaining, and to do that only in the fourth quarter. Because in the last 59.9 seconds of the second half, if the team with the ball is awarded a throw-in in the backcourt, they have the option to move that throw-in to a line 28 feet from the end line on their offensive side of the court. And they can take that on either side of the floor. You'll hear the official ask the coach, "Coach, do you want to advance the throw-in?" If you hear the coach say yes, you can simply announce, "The Raiders choose to advance the inbounds." What about that little word that no one dares to say at the table in fear of jinxing the game? For high school games, for both boys and girls, overtime lasts 4 minutes. These periods continue until a winner is decided. Now we need to know that both team fouls and personal fouls carry over into overtime. The team foul count doesn't start over for overtime periods. For college basketball, for both men and women, overtime lasts 5 minutes, and again it continues until there's a winner. Fouls, again, do not reset, so keep this in mind when you announce for personal fouls and team fouls. They carry over and don't reset for overtime. How about when an injury occurs during one of our games? What do we do? This answer is simple. Nothing. Anything we say or any music that's played could potentially interfere with any communications on the court to help that injured player. When an injured player either gets up or is helped up and off the court, we remain quiet. Let the crowd spontaneously applaud and leave it at that. As far as any safety issues that could arise, my only advice is to be prepared. There's another tutorial in this series specifically about our role in dealing with these emergency type situations. Instead of repeating myself here, I'd simply refer you back to that video. So, the game's over. Now what do we do? Well, that depends on what's been planned out for you. At the high school level, you could probably get away with just announcing the final score, thank everyone for coming, and wish them a safe trip home. As for the final score, especially for high school games, I don't do that if the differential was more than 20 points. If it's more than 20 points, I just wouldn't announce the final. The losing team knows they got blown out. They don't need me reminding them and everybody else in the gym of the score. I would go on to say that we want to thank you for attending tonight's game and for your continued support of high school basketball at both Cazenovia and Fayetteville Manlius High Schools. And whether you are a fan of the Lakers and travel to Marcellus next Tuesday for a 7 o'clock start with the Mustangs, or you're a fan of the Hornets and are right back here next Tuesday for a 7 o'clock start with the ESM Spartans, We'd like to remind all of you that all of us here with the FM School District, along with the Town of Manlius Police, ask that you all please buckle up and enjoy a safe trip home. Now at the college level, you probably won't have that freedom to come up with your own closing script. Your post-game reads are more than likely already scripted out for you. Maybe they want you to read the final game and individual statistics. If that's the case, just know who's responsible for getting them to you so you can do that. If you do have some input into the script, I would ask to add some specifics like these. After announcing the final score and thanking them for coming and supporting the team, if your team's next game is a road game, see if you can add where that road game is and how the fans can tune in. Is it available on the radio? Is it streaming somewhere? Does a television network pick it up? Is it on ESPN? I do this to keep our fans connected even when the team is on the road. Then, read when their home game is next and where the fans can go to get their tickets. Then, is there some kind of traditional saying at the college or university that you can close with? Well, at Colgate University, that phrase is "Go Gate." So, when I sign off, I finish off by saying, Ladies and gentlemen, please drive home safely. And wherever you go, go Gate! So, that about covers it. I hope I was able to help you feel a little more comfortable about announcing high school basketball for boys and girls and college hoops for men and for women. Please feel free to send any constructive comments to me at my email address here on the screen. And also, browse our website, publicaddressannouncer.org, for more resources related to all things public address announcing. So, thanks for watching this episode of Announcing the Game. I'm Tom Winicki, and I look forward to hearing you on the mic.